Hi, welcome back, everybody. This is the AI update for October 7th, 2025, here on the AIX Higher Ed podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be back, and I'm feeling a little better. So this will sound better than it would have if we recorded it last night. But we're going to hit some of our kind of major themes. The build out which of AI, which continues to be rapid, some developments in agentic AI, some further developments, believe it or not, in video and synthetic realities. We're starting to see kind of the impacts of some of these technologies. Another look at the economic impact, though this time it'll be positive. Some progress and some things are happening at the university level and a little bit of K-12, and some new challenges, not new, but some ones that we've not previously covered in terms of AI.
So we'll start talking about the build, and this is a continuing story, of course. At this stage, OpenAI has, by this report, signed $1 trillion worth of AI infrastructure contracts, and this is the equivalent of 20 gigawatts of computing capacity. And it's at each gigawatt costing about $50 billion. They're estimating a total bill close to a trillion. Of course, OpenAI does not have the revenue to be able to support this yet, and that's what some of the speculation is about. Is this a bubble? Is this something that can be supported? Would this be able to continue? But a lot of it that we'll see when we talk about some of these economic arguments is that it's built into the longer term plans to be able to meet demand, and also to be able to meet some of the business applications that are just really starting at this stage.
Yeah, and that brings us a little bit to the discussion of the bubble, right? Like they're saying that in venture capitalists, right, already contributed close to $200 billion to AI startups in 2025. And I think that's a lot of the bubble debate, the nuance is a little bit missed, right? People say, "Oh, Sam Altman says it's a bubble." And then they say Sam Altman saying AI is going to collapse. No, that's not what he's saying. Is what he's saying is, look, a lot of these startups, they're not going to make it, right? And investors in a lot of these startups are going to lose money. They're probably the same investors on other startups that'll make money, right? But the point is that every startup will not succeed, but really the overall trajectory, of AI will continue to grow, just like with the internet, right? We had the dot-com bubble and like right around 2000 when a lot of the internet companies went out of business, but obviously the internet today is everyday part of our lives. And this really just kind of someone kind of talking about, okay, saying it's a bubble, why they're taking such large risks. Because the payout, especially if unfortunately you're able to replace a substantial amount of labor, is astronomical, right? So people keep calling this the table stakes of winning to be able to win the huge pot, just like in a poker game. It's kind of problematic, maybe that we're thinking of it that way, but when you're aiming for trillions of dollars in profit and the potential to transform the whole economy, you're willing to put a lot of money up, even if you might lose some of it.
And there are a number of indications as to why this isn't the same kind of bubble that we've experienced before because of the nature of other elements. It's not just software, it's also robotics, embodied AI. There are different elements that it's the big companies that really have the means to be able to put the money forward. There are a lot of reasons to suggest that it is ballooning much faster than maybe people had projected or they thought it was going to, but it's likely more sustainable than some of the naysayers might assume. Now, moving on to Agentic AI, there were some developments coming out of OpenAI this week, and they had their development day on Monday. And two big developments and releases. The first was their agent kit. And this is one that is really not as code specific. It has nodes that you can actually design an agentic workflow within OpenAI's space within ChatGPT. And not specifically within ChatGPT, but by employing different elements of GPT and then giving it different actions that can be taken. So that agent builder is something that is a little bit more intuitive. It doesn't quite take out all of the other non-coding agentic workflows because it's not quite as intuitive as some of the others. But it's certainly going to make it easier for those developers and people that do have some coding experience and some software architecture experience to be able to put things together a little more quickly, a little more easily.
And they're talking about too with the they're putting apps like right into ChatGPT itself, right? So like the popular, I guess in Coursera, that's one of the things that's integrated. Canvas is integrated. I think Expedia.com. is integrated. So you can work with these apps, like, right, they're big apps, Expedia, right, Canvas, right in ChatGPT itself. So again, we talked about this before, but you don't even have to leave the platform. And people are talking about really what this kind of means for the future of software, right? It's obvious, maybe with what you just showed there, it's going to be easier to build your own software, but it's also just going to be able to use software right within kind of ChatGPT itself.
And at this stage, they're just really testing a lot of different user interfaces. And part of this, of course, is to be able to make sure that people are staying on the platform, also to be able to see what the workflow is going to be that'll be most effective. But you can imagine doing something like Coursera while you're working through course material and you have ChatGPT there to answer questions immediately. It could really change the way you interact with that other more traditional software maybe that you've used before by integrating ChatGPT into that project.
And the other big kind of agentic thing is Perplexity has released their agentic browser really to everybody, 200 million users. And as we've talked about before, and I know you've demoed, you can basically give it the whole assignment and have the agentic browser go out and do the assignment, log on to the learning management system, access any databases that students are logged into. We always kind of talk about that in terms of kind of academics, but it's something that I've barely used. I actually want to use a little bit more these agentic browsers, but they're becoming pretty ubiquitous. And then, this one of just, one of the big things, like, we talked about those vibe coders, software and people, being able to vibe code. And one of the kind of the problems with them is that, they do have like a lot of security holes because obviously the people who are vibe coding, they don't necessarily know, right, like enough about kind of coding to kind of solve for that. And, a lot of people said, well, there'll be other companies that come in and provide the security, but, Google Code Mender is designed to automatically kind of fix the security flaws in the software. And I've seen the last few days a lot of LinkedIn's, people saying, "Oh, I've got to do this and that," and it kind of plugged all these security holes. And obviously, AI is going to create more cybersecurity problems, but this is kind of a big deal, right, in terms of the AI being able to fix the security problems it creates.
Yeah. Now, moving on to video, and obviously Sora is a continuing story, and we talked a bit about this last week and showed some of the examples. Now they've developed it, a couple of other developments with Sora, one being that they've included this video generation into making it available for developers to include in their apps. So this could really bring products to life more quickly, according to Altman. And you're going to start to see some other kinds of developments and other applications for the use of Sora in other workflows other than just standalone videos.
And they are trying to add a little bit of security. It's like a lot of these things that get the product out there, they say how you use it. They're trying to do things where it's like, all right, if you don't want yourself to be like in these parts of videos, or you don't want like these types of videos, you're able to put some controls around it. I think they're going to find it's challenging to put in a lot of these controls. I haven't spent too much time on it since last week. I tried creating some videos and I played around with it this weekend when I wasn't feeling well. But I haven't done a ton, but I see a lot of reports that there's a lot of really kind of racist videos that are being created, misogynistic videos. So they're gonna probably have to do a lot to, try to not letting it just become a pretty bad ecosystem.
The other thing that they've had to respond to, there were really two other developments, mostly in response to criticism. The first is that their users found that if they tried to delete Sora, it would also delete their ChatGPT account or close their ChatGPT account. They've evidently fixed that. The other is that this approach toward copyright is one that obviously received a lot of flack. The idea that companies had to opt out to otherwise their IP was going to be open to be recreated within Sora, and they said they've come around to that, saying no, actually they're going to give, of course, recognized copyright control, but they'll hopefully find ways to be able to share revenue, which they haven't come out to say exactly where that revenue is going to come from. Most are assuming that's going to come from advertising of some sort. So missing a lot of details, but starting to kind of course correct out of after what was a really messy start last week. Certainly, it impressed a lot of people in terms of the technological capabilities, but the use of the social media platform, the flagrant copyright violations, and the kinds of content that was being created, now they're having to course correct a bit and starting to fix some of those problems.
All right, so related, to video and synthetic reality, Synthesia, which was one of the original producers of avatars, right, that I used is now really saying, okay, we have lifelike avatars that you can kind of train and send out to the meetings and work with people on kind of on your behalf as if it was actually you. So we're going to see more of these synthetic people in our meetings.
Now moving on to the economy.
Okay, so the only thing we're going to mention about the economy this week is there's a new actual podcast out based on some research that really kind of says that a lot of the studies that are talking about the positive impact of AI on the economy are really underestimated. And if you just flip on the next slide, it really kind of talks about why, and the reasons are that basically it doesn't look at the compounding effects, right? We're still talking about normal linear. A lot of the studies are still talking about normal linear growth in the economy, not kind of AI producing AI. That none of like these studies, and I've actually read a lot of them. They don't even account for robotics, which are obviously kind of really kind of coming in to the economy and how AI is just really going to be able to improve itself. So they could, we're potentially have a very kind of rapid economic takeoff if we hit AGI.
Now, looking at sovereign AI and politics, and certainly a lot of national security concerns and international geopolitical reactions. And this is a Financial Times article, obviously, talking about the EU and concerns about AI strategy. And we're seeing more and more of this. Obviously, we've talked before about the US trying to decrease reliance on China for certain means, China trying to reduce China's access to chips. Now, the EU is also concerned about this too. And, some recent reports talking about data centers, for instance, there are very few countries in the world that actually have data centers, and even fewer that are having data centers being built. The EU is probably a distant third to the US and China, but still in the running for being able to build out an AI strategy. And they're really trying to develop a more of a sovereign approach so that they aren't overly reliant.
And this brings up a couple of issues. One of the godfathers of AI, one of the leaders, Jan LeCun, right? He's originally from France, and he's here in the U.S., but he's kind of he's working at Meta, and a couple concerns have arisen. One is that they Meta is kind of guarding like the IP of a lot of the research that's being done, and he runs this lab FAIR, which is kind of a just kind of basic like foundational research on AI, and all this stuff has to get approved. And there's articles circulating that kind of like he's upset about this, but there's also he and Mark Zuckerberg have taken very different approaches, to the Trump administration. Mark Zuckerberg has aligned himself with that. Yeah, LeCun's been very, very critical of Trump on social media, especially on Twitter. So it'll kind of be interesting, especially, he's European, especially as we see Europe saying, well, we don't want to rely on the United States for AI. We could start to potentially see some, other splintering. The world's largely been kind of united around the same internet, with some exceptions like China and other things. But I don't think any country is going to want other countries to have all their data and all the control and kind of be dependent on it.
In the same way that we've been talking about how companies are in really a battle toward AGI, and it's one company perhaps winning the whole battle. The same thing's happening geopolitically, and there are countries certainly worried that if one country controls a far superior AI model, then what does it mean for other countries? And that's going to continue to play out.
And robots, we don't have as much with robots to catch up with this weekend, but as you can see, there's a new kind of I don't know if it's a new robot, but kind of some advances in robotics where like the robot, as you can see here, is like given the goal to get up on the table, but it's like, oh, I can't really get up on the table. So just like a person, it goes and it finds a chair and it puts the chair next to the table and it climbs up on the table and then decides to jump off the table, and it even kind of rolls. So I was showing this to a few students today just to really kind of demonstrate how advanced robotics is becoming.
And also interesting to see, I mean, obviously this is part of it before, but to see the video feed from the robot and how the robot is actually viewing the situation and then calculating what the reaction is going to be and moving pretty quickly in terms of taking those steps. There is just a lot of dexterity being demonstrated here, and we're just going to continue to see more of these advances as robotics is advancing and also AI is advancing to be able to drive that robotics.
Uh, there's been some interesting kind of new research. There's a lot. We just kind of cover a fraction of it here. But one is just kind of a new study on, AI and democracy. And I think it's, going to have a lot of impacts on our system of government governance. A lot of people talk about surveillance. Surveillance has kind of become ubiquitous. This article makes a point of like, okay, but we can connect and learn more and these types of things. I think is a very kind of generous interpretation of the positive impacts. But this is it's a good and interesting study and commentary.
This is something that we heard about a little bit last week, and certainly in reaction to some of what was coming out of OpenAI with Sora. But some researchers who had left some of the foundation labs and develop periodic labs where their focus is to be able to create an AI scientist. And they were using the discussion about social media platforms and AI slop to be able to respond to say, we want to drive AI in the direction where it will really do the most good, and to be able to develop AI models for science, to be able to advance science and find breakthroughs. And so they've gotten a lot of play, a lot of discussion. And the other interesting element of it is that when they have a mission that's that clear, and that is that goal oriented, that's not just about ad revenue, they're able to attract some really top talent. And so there were a number of researchers that went to periodic labs, perhaps even foregoing bigger paychecks elsewhere, because they were more interested in doing this kind of work rather than signing on for something like Meta, where they're not sure exactly what they're going to be producing or what they'd be supporting.
And then, for with universities and related to academia, we see some pretty some interesting developments, in AI here. It's just talking about like who's talking about the amount of money, right, that we plan on investing in AI, right? 7 trillion by 2030, right? We opened with kind of the discussion of kind of this $1 trillion commitment. So, it talked about that, and something I kind of wrote in 2024 that we're really investing so much in artificial intelligence as opposed to human intelligence. Imagine if we were, invest $7 trillion in developing our own intellectual capacities. So it's just kind of really starting to hit a lot of people, how big of, investments and changes we're starting to see.
And the disparity in the impact that's going to occur with higher education is higher education is being squeezed economically, fewer governments, lower levels of support from the government, pressure from tuition, from students not wanting to pay tuition, and also calls for halting tuition increases. There's less and less money going into higher education, and they're having a harder time making ends meet. We're probably going to see a number of universities close over the next several years while there's the shift to AI. And that has not only the economic repercussions, but also to discuss what does it really mean for the development of human intelligence while we're developing AI intelligence, as Stefan was alluding to. That's a really important societal question, and with some big sociological impacts that I don't know that anybody's really talking about.
And we also kind of see that the question of majors, right? Like it's hard, right? We have students enrolled now in majors this year that I'm sure have existed for a long kind of period of time. But somebody even asked the question, well, what if we come up with some new majors like a synthetic data architect, human AI dynamics coach, machine learning bias auditor, all things that people are currently interested in. So imagine you're a graduating high school student. Imagine somehow that, universities create these majors. You could still enter this major, and in 4 years, some of these things may not even be relevant anymore, right? So, in one way, it poses an existential question, like, well, what do you mean if we universities can't offer majors, then we're not going to be able to survive, right? But that's only looking at it, I think, in a narrow lens, right? I think universities have to start thinking about kind of more broadening the skill sets and the capacities of their students to really be able to do almost anything and to learn how to do anything, almost anything when they graduate, because trying to figure out what the magic major is probably not really a successful or sustainable strategy.
I was talking with a group of high school students yesterday and was trying to make this very point that it's going to be very difficult to be able to say that you have a degree to prepare you for a specific job because those jobs will be changing. And so probably better that you have the foundational skills, the durable skills we've talked about, but be able to engage in self-learning and be able to learn very quickly and be able to adapt in terms of your learning. That's going to be a very different mindset for students. We haven't prepared them for that, to think about how do they take charge of their own educational process, how do they take charge of their own self-learning. And we need to start with that in K-12, certainly well before they get to college. And that's going to be a major undertaking.
And this, I love this. I happened to come across this, when I was scrolling, spending too much time scrolling on my phone. But Ray Kurzweil, who people say is the oldest living AI scientist, he's the one who said in 2029, we'll have AGI, which, we're probably going to get close to that thing. He just won this award, this Humanities Award from MIT, and he talks about, right? He says curiosity, critical thinking, and creative problem solving central to the humanities, arts, and social sciences are key as we merge with technology. And I've seen some things, and I think it was Syracuse University, cutting like a lot of these humanities programs. Because you're saying, oh, well, like you're saying, universities are financially squeezed, and people are opening like, sometimes a lot of these AI centers, they're looking for professors with AI technical background. But I think, and I was talking with somebody this today, the kind of getting missed is the AI is going to be able to do a lot of the technical stuff, right? And we really need to think about these hard questions about how we're going to work with AI, what it means to be human in a world of AI, right? As you were just talking about, right? The general skills that we're going to need, and how are we going to think about the fact that we're spending $7 trillion basically investing in non-human technology, well, or non-human intelligence, when we're cutting back the amount of money that's being invested in human technology, in human intelligence. And these are fundamentally questions that humanities are going to need to address.
Yeah. This is another study from the College Board talking about the number of high school students reported using AI for schoolwork, up to 84% from 79% earlier this year. We're just continuing to see this creep. And the point that is made here is that students are being cautious about it because they don't know what the guardrails are. They're not really given guidance. And they're not looking for ways to cheat. They're looking for ways to be able to give their best possible work. And more of these tools are being integrated into workflows for adults as well as for students. More of a reason why we really need to make sure that we're developing AI literacy programs, support programs, and development programs for our students and for our instructors, and also to make sure that we're giving proper guardrails and instructions on how to use it appropriately. Now, moving on to a couple of points about some challenges that aren't necessarily new, but are new to our discussion about societal challenges related to AI.
There's a new paper, right? Is AI conscious? A primer on the myths and confusions driving the debate. And while these authors kind of take a skeptical approach to, whether AI is conscious, which I think is what most people have, right now they do kind of lay out on and discuss like all the arguments as to why some people believe AI is conscious, or why it may be seemingly conscious, or why it might become conscious. And this is a challenge that we're going to have to confront as a society. I'm not sure that AI will become conscious. I am pretty sure that a lot of people will start to see it as conscious, and I think there's probably a consensus on that. So this is an issue we're going to struggle with.
Then there's a report from Microsoft talking about the capabilities of AI to be able to develop, biological threats, designing toxins that could evade security controls, an ongoing concern. We have touched on that a little bit before. This is another area where we need to make sure that there are guardrails, there are protections, and as new models are being developed, that they're figuring out what the applications really could be. And not all models and frontier model companies are doing this equally, and they all need to probably have better regulation along those lines.
And last warfare, some of the stuff is kind of hard to read and talk about, but especially in the Ukraine, which was probably, I think, in the future, people say the first, time when AI drones were used, and there's some, it's hard to estimate a little bit, but there's some research that's saying that 90% of battlefield casualties are now caused by drones, and that even soldiers in traditional metrics are being killed by the drones, right? Even if they've been very successful in kind of human traditional human combat, and it's a challenge, right? That we are going to have to deal with. You may have seen the reports about all these drones like all over these European airports. That we're going to have to find some defenses to drones, and they're probably going to become a key part of warfare. They already probably are, and more into the future. And these are challenges. I think when I always talk about, I'll never forget last year, one of my young debaters told me she liked debate because she gets to learn about what's going on in the world. And I kind of thought that was a little sad that, well, she goes to school all day and she doesn't know she doesn't learn about what's going on in the world. But students, they're aware of these things, right? This isn't the 1960s, early 1970s, where the only thing you heard about the Vietnam War was, what they kind of sanitized before they presented it on the 6 p.m. Evening news. This is stuff that students are seeing every day in their TikTok feeds, and now will probably be generated by synthetic TikTok feeds. So I think, whether at the university level or the high school level, we need to, be prepared to start, talking about these things with our students, even if we don't have the answers.
As with many of the other challenges, they're continuing, they're persistent, and we need to have these discussions. As Stefan was saying, one of the reasons why I think we like debate as an activity is because it provides that space, and providing space for your students to talk about it in the classroom is an important first step. We can't hide from it, and we don't want to try and pretend that these trends aren't happening. But we need to be able to talk about them responsibly with our students. Well, that's everything that we have for this week. We look forward to seeing you next week with what I'm sure will be another very busy week of developments and changes in the AI world. Thanks so much, Stefan.
Thanks, Alan.